Good morning, sixth graders. In our first week of review, we're going to spend some time working on how to take data that's in a line plot, data that's in a table, data that's in a pictograph, turn that into a circle graph. So let's take a minute and get to it. First, I'm going to provide you with a chart of fractions, decimals, and percents that you should just know. If you want to pause your screen and write these down, these will be very helpful. So I'll give you a minute to do that. Go ahead, push pause, and come back to the video. Okay, now that you're back, these fractions, decimals, and percents are going to be helpful because in all of our data that we do today, all of the numbers, all of the data should become either halves, fourths, or eighths. With that in mind, let's get to some data. So let's take this guy here and turn this thing into a circle graph. So again, the intended plan is to take this data that's arranged on what we call a line plot and turn this into a circle graph. Again, all of the data should become halves, fourths, and eighths, okay? All right, so if you remember, X's on the line tell us how many times each of these numbers appear in the data. So first of all, even though there's a 4 and a 5 listed at the bottom here of the line plot, there are no X's above it, which means if this represents the number of cars that people owned in a lifetime, nobody had 4 cars. Nobody had 5 cars. So these numbers that don't have X's on them will not appear in the data. Okay? So it looks like there were 2 people in the survey that owned 1 car. Okay, so we can take this data and we can write it as a fraction. So there were 2 people that owned 1 car, but that's 2 people out of how many? To figure out the denominator, to figure out of how many, we can take all of our x's and just total them. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So there were 2 out of the 16 total people that were in the survey that had 1 car. Let's do the same thing with 2 cars. Looks again like there were 2 out of the 16. For 3 cars, it looks like there were 4 out of the 16. For 6, it looks like there were 2 out of the 16. And for 8, it looks like there were 6 out of the 16. Again, there were no 9s and no 10s, so they're just simply not going to appear in our data. Okay? Now, if you remember back just a few seconds ago, I said to you all of our data should come out to be either halves, fourths, or eighths. But as I'm looking at this data, everything is out of sixteenths. So that means that I could take this circle and cut it into 16 equal parts. That doesn't sound fun. But if I look a little closer, all of these numerators are even numbers. So if all of the numerators are even and all the denominators are even, I think I can reduce these. And if I reduce them, it should again get them to halves, fourths, and eighths. So I think 2 out of 16, this I think is going to reduce to 1 out of 8. This guy is going to reduce to 1 out of 8, which means this is also 1 out of 8. Now 4 sixteenths, I can divide both of those by 4, and that's going to become 1/4. And 6 out of 16, they're both even, divide them by 2, I think that's going to become 3 out of 8. Okay, so again, notice every single one of our denominators is now either eighths, fourths, or halves, and in this case we don't have any halves. So it looks like the biggest denominator that I have is 8. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this circle and I'm going to cut this circle into eighths. Okay, so to do that, we're going to make our big plus sign. And I'm going to do this very lightly because I may end up having to reduce these lines when I'm done. So a big plus sign, and then on top of the big plus sign, a big multiply sign. And I've now, I believe, cut this circle into 8 equal size pieces. Okay? Now let's go take the data that we have and mark each of these parts of the circle with their given piece. So it looks like 1/8 of the people said they had 1 car in their lifetime. So out of the 8 pieces that are here, 1 of them is going to be given to the people that had 1 car. So I can take one of these pieces, one of these wedges, and it doesn't matter which one we pick, guys. I usually work from 12 o'clock clockwise, but you can do it any way that you want. So I'm going to take this first one. This represents 1/8 of the data. Now, if I have my chart in front of me, the one that I showed you at the beginning, 1/8, the fraction, turns into 12.5 as a percent. So I'm going to go back over to my circle. This is 12.5% of the circle, and it represents the people that had 1 car in their lifetime. So I'm going to start with this part of the wedge. I'm going to make this guy a little darker, take it to the center point. Going to make this other side of that wedge a little darker. Okay, so 1 car in your lifetime, that was 12.5% of the people. Let's go to the next one. So it looks like 1/8 of the people also own 2 cars. So again, out of the 8 pieces that are here, I'm going to give 1 of them to 2 cars. So I'm going to take this edge that just finished up the last wedge, and I'm going to finish up the other side of that wedge, and this guy would represent 2 cars in a lifetime. And again, that's 1 out of 8, which I think the percent for that is 12.5%. Okay? So far we used 1/8 for 1 car in their lifetime, 1/8 for 2 cars in their lifetime. So that should be 2/8 gone. And out of our 8, we've got 1, 2 that are now gone. Now 1/4 of the people in the survey had 3 cars in their lifetime. Well, if you remember when we cut our circle, we didn't cut it into 4 parts. We cut it into 8 parts. So if we make this into 8ths, 1/4 into 8ths, I think that's going to become 2/8, right? So out of these 8ths, we have to give 2 of these parts then to 3 cars in their lifetime. So I'm going to give again the next 2, which means if I give this one and this one, this becomes the edge, and I don't need this middle line. So now I can go to my pencil that has an eraser, and for me, I had to go get a second pencil that had an eraser because my first pencil didn't. Get rid of that center line, and now this part of our circle is the people that had 3 cars in a lifetime. And that fraction, 1/4, if we go back to our chart, 1/4 can be represented by 25%. So back to our circle, 25% of the people in our survey said that they had 3 cars in a lifetime. Back up to the next piece of data. Looks like nobody had 4, nobody had 5, so they're not going to appear in the data at all. But we got to people that had 6 cars, and that was, when we reduced this fraction, 1/8 again. So again, 1 out of these 8, we've already used 4 of them. We got 4 left. So I'm going to take 1 of these from the center point, make this a little darker line, and this is going to represent the people that had 6 cars in a lifetime, and that was 1/8. And again, back to our data, 1/8 was 12.5%. So this is 12.5% of the circle. And then our last piece of data that we got to take care of, nobody had 7 cars, but it looks like 6 people had 8 cars. So we took our 6/16, reduced it to 3/8. So out of the 8 pieces, 3 of them are going to be given to 8. The good news is we've got 3 pieces left. So this piece, and this piece are all the same size part. So again, I'm going to take my eraser. I'm going to get rid of those center lines. I don't need those. And this is going to represent the people that had 8 cars in a lifetime. And that was the fraction 3/8. Go back to my chart. And 3/8 we said was 37.5%. So this guy here is 37.5% of the total. The last thing I need to do is, this appears to be my title of my chart. So I would want to take this title, put it above my circle graph because all circle graphs should have an appropriate title. We've now taken a line plot and turned it into its circle graph. Hope this helped. Hope you guys are doing well. Talk to you again soon.